Hello everyone, welcome to Urbanscape Bangalore, and in this episode we will look at some important Petrea Volubilis growing and blooming tips. The Petrea, or the purple wreath, or the sandpaper vine is native to tropical Americas and is a perennial plant that blooms during the summer to monsoon months in India. The blooming is short-lived and it will bloom once or twice a year. This belongs to the Verbinaceae family, and this is a climbing plant and needs ample support to grow bigger and better. The leaves have this rough texture, and that is why the name sandpaper vine. This is an exotic plant and it's not seen too often in many gardens. So, way back in 2017, at work, there was a gardener chopping off the plant and he was about to throw the cuttings anyway. So I asked him if I could take it and he gave me some cuttings. And you may remember the video in which I propagated those cuttings, and thankfully it was successful, and the result is this. The plant is not a vigorous grower and will not overpower other plants. The blooms will change color over time from a light blue to purple and then finally a gray-green color. The leaves are said to have medicinal value for diabetes. But please don't eat it since there is not much scientific information regarding this. These black bees, which we in India call bumblebees, love these blooms. So let's get to the growing tips. Tip number 1, sunlight. Give this part sun to full sun conditions, but I would suggest you give this some shade and not expose it to full sun, especially if you have harsh summers. So even if you keep this growing against a wall facing the southwest, it will bloom really well. Full sun may burn the leaves, so if you see some kind of burning, then please move it. Also, I feel it is better to give the soil some shade and let the stem do its thing like what I have done here. Tip number 2, watering. The plant will definitely not do well with too much water. But water every day during summer, and during winters, water once you see the soil is comfortably dry. Tip number 3, potting mix. Use a well-draining mix of 40% sand, 40% compost, 20% garden soil or coco peat. It is always good to have some water-retaining medium, hence the garden soil. Make sure you add compost because this does well with a lot of organic growing medium. Tip number 4, fertilizing. Now this is where your blooming comes into picture. You need to heavily fertilize this plant with compost every month during the spring and summer months. You can add vegetable waste and lot of banana peels to induce more blooming. I don't add any chemical fertilizer, and if this is the result I get, then you can too. Winter is resting time for the Petrea, so don't fertilize during winters. Tip number 5, pruning. You can prune this plant since the next year's bloom will come from new shoots. I don't prune my Petrea, but you can if you have this growing in the ground especially. People growing this in pots can prune if you see that the plant is struggling or not growing too many leaves. Tip number 6, a support. For any climbing plant, if there is no support for it to grow, don't expect it to do well or even bloom. So another blooming tip would be to give it enough support and see it bloom and thrive. Tip number 7, container size. Container size is very important because the plant needs to grow big to give you these big blooms. So invest in a big container when it comes to the Petrea, because who would not want to have this purpley goodness in their home? Tip number 8, pests. This is quite pest resistant. You might see some aphids or whiteflies, but in my experience, I've never struggled with pest problems with this plant. Tip number 9, propagation. So this does give out seeds, but the more easier method to grow this is with the help of stem cuttings. The more cuttings you use, at least one would give out roots like this one did in this old video of mine. So some of my old videos are quite cringy, so you could watch it or wait for a new improved video, maybe the next year. Tip number 10, cold tolerance and humidity. Since this is a tropical plant, it will not do well in cold countries, and some amount of humidity in the air helps this plant bloom. So folks, if you're lucky enough to get this plant, you can follow these growing tips and get this amazing purple infusion in your garden as well. With this, we've come to the end of yet another episode of Urbanscape Bangalore, and I really hope I've answered most of your Petrea questions in this video. Additionally, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook, the links are given below. Thank you for watching, and until we meet again, a very warm goodbye.